My name is Estela. I'm a faculty member in the School of Undergraduate Studies here at CIIS. And I'm thrilled. This is our third annual panel. It's a collaboration between the School of Undergraduate Studies and SF Vision, a collaboration with many amazing community organizers around San Francisco. This has just really become such a wonderful event. So I want to introduce our moderator for the evening. Talbot, to my right, who is an author and activist. His book, Season of the Witch, which tells the story of the wild birth of San Francisco values between the 1960s and 1980s, remained on the San Francisco Chronicle bestseller list for over 4 years and was selected by the San Francisco Public Library in 2015 for the One City, One Book reading campaign. Talbot is also the author of the New York Times bestsellers, The Devil's Chessboard, Alan Dulles and the CIA and the Rise of America's Secret Government, and Brothers, The Hidden History of the Kennedy Years. Talbot is the founder and former editor-in-chief of Salon, the pioneering online publication, and a former senior editor of Mother Jones magazine. He is currently writing a column for the San Francisco Chronicle. So I'm going to turn it over to David. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. And thanks all for coming. I mean, this is obviously an issue, a very burning issue in the city. And, you know, I wrote about various, really a civil war that took place in San Francisco in the 60s and 70s. And I think we're going through another version of that today. And basically, it's over who gets to live in the city. And I was talking to one of your professors earlier about the problem, the increasing problem that students are having just hanging on here. And so I think we all, in this new age of activism, really have to start getting more and more involved and fighting to hang on to the city that we all love so much. So it's great to have this group of people here who have been fighting on the front lines and doing the work of the angels for so long. I'm very proud to be sitting right next to the great Gordon Chin, who was, you are great, who was the founding executive director of the Chinatown Community Development Center. I had the pleasure of writing about Gordon recently in my column, you might have seen in the San Francisco Chronicle. A longtime hero and activist going way back to at least the I Hotel, if not before that. And the author of a wonderful book about organizing in Chinatown that you should all definitely read. It's in paperback now, right, Gordon? And the title again, you don't have it down here, is?
Building Community Chinatown Style.
Right. Thank you, Gordon. And next to Gordon is another great figure here in San Francisco, Estela Garcia, who's the executive director of DMH, a licensed clinical psychologist, has over 30 years experience working at the Instituto Familiares de la Raza, and has served as IFR's executive director since 2005. She's been directly involved in program design and implementation of programs there, and was instrumental in developing its culturally informed multi-service programs. Estela, it's wonderful to have you here as well. Thank you. And then, sitting next to Estela is Chirag, Bhakta, born and raised here in San Francisco, dedicated to ensuring his city remains welcoming and affordable to low-income and working-class families. He currently works as an organizer for an affordable housing developer and is vocal in his opposition to gentrification, displacement, and the restructuring of San Francisco into a paradise exclusively for the young and rich. And you know who they are. And next to Chirag is Bilal Ali, a longtime passionate and dedicated activist and organizer and recent transplant from my hometown, Los Angeles, with over 30 years experience working in the social justice arena. Bilal is currently a human rights advocate and organizer with the Coalition on Homelessness. and he's the founder of the People's Commission for Justice in San Francisco. Bilal. And hiding back there is Fernando Marti, is a co-director of CHU, San Francisco-based council, community housing organizations, is a coalition of the housing and community development nonprofits working to build a Bay Area that we can all afford to live in and work in and thrive. And Fernando will be showing a slideshow momentarily. And finally, next to Fernando is my good friend and fellow activist, Christina Olague, who is the true force behind San Francisco Vision, which is a relatively new progressive group here in the city that is now trying to pull together a network of progressive groups, labor, community, environmental housing groups. We had a very successful meeting last Saturday that Christina might talk about. Really an effort now in the age of Trump to bring us all together, because we can't just be doing our things individually. We really do need to coalesce at this point in order to fight this increasingly dire threat that we face not just in San Francisco but nationally. So with that, Fernando, you're going to show us the slideshow first, and then we'll get into a bit of a discussion.
Let's see how this works. So it's going to be over on this side. Sarah told me that you're all students and you're very comfortable moving all your chairs sideways to make. So what Christina asked me was to talk a little bit about our community, my community that I have worked with for the last 20 years in the Mission District. And I want to start, and I always start this slideshow with where we come from. We are standing on Indian land, land that had many names, that had many villages, even right here where we stand. When the Spanish arrived, they found villages, people tending the waterfront, the marshes that were right where we stand right now. Soon came the gold diggers, and the history of this city is one of a city that was transformed in the course of 2 years from a little town of 1,000 people to 25,000 people coming searching for gold. And the Mission District developed, along with South Market, along with this area, as the part of the ecosystem of that city that was its industry, that created the things that were used by the city. It was a place for workers, and since its very inception, the neighborhood was a working class city, an immigrant city, a place where workers organized and fought for their rights. It was also a place that is, if you look at this map, you see what's in the blue, the Mission District right in the middle. It was a place that was very dense, and it is that density that now the young and rich really want to live in. San Francisco was also the middle of the U.S.'s expansion as an imperial nation into the Pacific coast, which meant that this was the beachhead for the U.S. into Central America, and why San Francisco's Latino neighborhood is so multi-ethnic. It comes from so many countries in South and Central America. But soon the city and planners wanted to transform how we view the city. We wanted to create public housing, and during World War II, we began to plan for the city regionally through this thing called the Bay Area Council that decided that San Francisco was going to be a financial center, that industry was going to exist outside of San Francisco, and that we were going to have to get rid of blight. One of the ways they did that, go back to that slide, one of the things that was happening across the country was what was called redlining. Was in this map from, I think, 1940 or thereabouts, everything that is red is where you could not get a mortgage to buy. It was those neighborhoods that were black or Latino in San Francisco and Chinatown up on the edge. The other thing that happened shortly after the war was the arrival of container ships, which also led to the decimation of industry in San Francisco. During the war, we had a great migration of people coming to live in the city, African Americans and others coming from across the country to work here. But for Mexicans in particular, the Bracero program brought people to work in the fields in the Central Valley that had been worked on by Filipinos and Japanese and others from the Pacific. Folks were brought in from Mexico to work. The mission slowly transformed in the 40s and 50s into the Latino heart of San Francisco. With it came, that happened in the start of the civil rights movement and the connections built between the farm workers and the struggles for farm workers and what was going on in the Mission District. At the same time, there were increasing numbers of people of color going to school at SS State and building what was at that time the biggest strike in the 60s around student issues around creating a Department of Ethnic Studies. It is still the only real Department of Ethnic Studies of any university in the United States, and is constantly under attack. But through that, the people who started to go into these programs took what they learned back into their communities. Latinos worked around police brutality issues with Los Siete. And back to where I started my slideshow, the occupation of Alcatraz was something that started in the Mission District out of the Indian Center that existed there. But there was a continual push to reimagine and retransform these communities. And in the 60s and 70s, it was urban renewal. So if folks know the Mission District, this was supposed to be 16th and Mission with 10-story buildings all around. And that was the vision in 1970. And it's taken them until 2016 to come back with plans to actually build that 10-story demolition of what exists and rebuild the neighborhood. But folks, seeing how folks in the Western Addition had started to organize against urban renewal, how folks right here in South of Market had been organizing around urban renewal, organizing the mission to stop that destruction of the neighborhood. They were successful. But what happened was it was a vision around redeveloping the areas where the BART stations were going to be built. BART lines were built, but the way they were built was in such a way that they tore up all of the streets both on Market Street and down Mission Street and decimated the businesses that were there, the long-time businesses that were there. While the organization that came around to stop urban renewal only lasted a few years, a lot of nonprofits came out of that. And the Mission District now has, I think, one of the most vibrant collection of social service networks around. As the mission developed, it developed also its connections back to where people came from, so back to Central America. These, and again, the continuing story of police brutality and repression in the 70s against lowriders who cruised up and down Mission Street. But the Mission District, as a place that was Mexican and Central American, had a lot of connections back to the struggles in Central America, back to the struggles in El Salvador and Nicaragua specifically, both the revolutions that were happening there, the civil wars, and then the death squads and folks fleeing to come to a safe place in the Mission District. This, right now the word sanctuary city is very much on people's minds because of Trump's attacks. Sanctuary cities began with the INS raids in the 1980s of Salvadoreño nightclubs in the Mission District, and now we return to that. The Mission District is still a home for many of the workers of the city. Now it's a lot of our service workers, folks in the hotel industry. But for how long, right? There are big changes happening in many of our traditionally working class neighborhoods. And we see this through some very direct effects. hotels that get burned down. This was a hotel that burned down in the late 70s, the Hotel Gartland, and then returning again in a new cycle of fires from a year ago, the Mission Market, and then the evictions. This was a family or a group of folks, workers who were evicted, who lost their home in the Mission District. There's also the abandonment of that housing that was built through the vision in the 1930s of what public housing would be as housing for the working classes that was abandoned by the federal government, increasingly with less and less maintenance, and then rebuilt by many of our nonprofits today. But the story of gentrification is also a story. I stole this Death by Gentrification from Rebecca Solden. Is a story also about police killings and police brutality. So what we see as the neighborhood transforms, I think, is a new version of colonization, of money coming back into what was working class neighborhoods and transforming it with these hyper luxury homes. That history in the Mission District particularly is also one of rising up and fighting those changes. So these are some rallies from the early 2000s. This is artwork that was done by some of my comrades in the SF Print Collective around what was happening in the neighborhood. A lot of that is also about people planning for what the future of their neighborhood should be. And that's where I met Christina years ago, was through the People's Plan process. But a lot of it only really comes to fruition with direct action. So this was the Mission District with 300 people taking over City Hall 2 years ago, and the changes that, or the response that created from City Hall. So Christina asked me to do a little bit about some statistics. One of the big statistics is looking over the last decade, how many people who were working class or Latinos have left that neighborhood. And it's tough to talk about these things as displaced because there's a lot of churn. People move in and out. But when you look at a neighborhood over time, you see, for example, the loss of families who are earning less than $50,000 or who are earning less than $75,000 being replaced by households earning over $100,000 or over $150,000. And we see that very directly in the evictions, so we can track how many evictions happen. But a lot of that, this is what's actually happening, which is the harassment from landlords that makes people move. So San Francisco sets itself, so in my work with Choo Choo, we work very much around these questions around the goals that the city sets itself for the kinds of housing that it should be building. There's a narrative that in San Francisco we haven't been building enough market rate housing, and that's why housing is really expensive. Well, over the last decade, we approved 200% of the goals that we had set ourselves for market rate housing. So what's happened is this, is income inequality. So you see in 2010, a deep change among the very poor and the very rich, and very little change in the population in the middle. And you can track that against the United States. This is San Francisco, where the median for the top fifth is close to $300,000. So the answer we sometimes hear is let's build more luxury condos, because that's going to make housing more affordable. And it may do some things, but I don't think it's going to make housing more affordable. And so I think what we're going to be talking about are some of our answers to that. But to return to where we started, I think the idea of who controls land and how we keep that land affordable into the future is going to be key to our ability to stay in this city for working class folks, for the folks who work in healthcare and education, in our service industry, to continue to live in the city. So that's my little slideshow. I had a poem, but I don't think I have too much time, so
Read it later.
I'll read it later. Maybe it'll be my answer to your question.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Fernando. So we're going to organize this evening around 3 questions that we're going to put to our panelists tonight, and then we'll open it up to have a discussion with all of you. And so I guess let's just start with Gordon, since he's sitting right next to me. So the 3 questions that we're going to be wrestling with are the following. What is community to you? How do you describe your community? And how does it look and feel to you? That's number 1. Number 2, how does displacement and gentrification affect your community? And finally, what are the tools of resistance in your community? So, Gordon, you want to tackle those? And we're going to keep these, I think, to about 5 minutes each. Okay.
Or less.
Or less.
Or less.
You want me to talk about all 3 right now? Or
Yeah.
just the first?
However
quick
you wanna
overview,
just
right?
Go with it. Just
Yeah.
have that somewhere. But just,
Okay. But
talk
3
about who
minutes.
you are
3
and your
minutes.
work.
Yeah.
Introduce
We're
yourself.
timing you.
Who I am, Gordon Jen, born in San Francisco, grew up in Oakland, got my political education at Mary Junior College a couple years after the Panthers. Came to San Francisco State College in 1968, just in time to go on strike for a year. It was a tremendous education for a young 19-year-old kid. Fernando had a shot in his slideshow about Alcatraz. One of my fondest memories during the strike was a good friend of mine, Al Miller, who was head of the Native American student group at State College. Remember, Native Americans occupied Alcatraz for a year, right? And people could go there. So he said, you want to bring some folks from Chinatown to visit Alcatraz? This is like 6 months into the occupation. So I took some street kids off from Chinatown, and it was just mind-blowing to see and to listen to Native American. There was one older Native American woman, must have been 80, and we were sitting in a circle, and these were like 15, 16-year-old street kids from Chinatown, and they didn't listen to their parents at all, but they listened to her talk about the importance of this place to the people. And I think they really understood what she meant. And they really dug when she talked about the spiritual qualities of peyote, too. They really liked that. But I think the experiences we had as young people at State were, changed our lives. And it wasn't just about changing university. It was about meeting folks that are fighting for their communities. Right? I met a lot of the WAPAC and Waco activists from Western Addition fighting against redevelopment in those days. Remember Helen Rogers, Penny Stewart, Arthur Townsend. So we learned a lot about each other's communities. And I think it's a very important sense of identity that I have, not just with Chinatown, but for all communities, people of color communities and working class communities in this town. And we need to keep focusing, hard as it may be, on what we have in common, as opposed to what divides us. Because Lord knows we have some battles ahead. And Chinatown is part of that. We don't have time today to talk about all the differences between our respective experiences. But obviously, the decimation of the black community by redevelopment in the 60s and 70s, wiping out the Western Addition, was an iconic moment in this history of the city. And it was public action, endorsing that displacement. The black community has not recovered yet. The population under 6%. At the same time, we were dealing with the I Hotel in Manila Town in Chinatown. And that was a symbol of how private action, private development, right, with the blessing of the city, can cause massive displacement and destroying the symbol of the Filipino community. So those two iconic symbols of the 60s and 70s, redevelopment on the one hand, the I Hotel on the other hand, it became clarion calls for all of us that we need to deal with this stuff in a very serious and sustained way, right? But things have changed. We don't have those boogeymen anymore, redevelopment, I Hotel. the displacement that's happening in our communities today is much more insidious, right? You got Airbnb, you got the Olague, you got SROs being displaced. Rents increase when units go vacant. Right? There's no like huge redevelopment bulldozer coming in and wiping out, you know, a whole building. You see private owners dealing with a lot of that displacement on a one-off basis, 3 units here, you know, 6 units here. We have lost more rent control units than we have built. With all due respect, nonprofits have done the best they could, right? And the groups that Fernando works with, struggling really hard to build affordable housing. It's going to be harder. But we have lost more units in the private market during the last 20 years than we have created in terms of new affordable housing. So fundamentally, I think those real estate dynamics in San Francisco, combined with Trump, means that we need to sort of reshift some of our priorities. There may not be any affordable housing financing under Trump. So now is the time to focus on preserving the existing rent-controlled housing stock. The city, you know, is going to renovate all the public housing, but we're losing so many units that's affecting poor people, working-class people, and middle-class people being displaced in SROs, in apartments all over the city, right? And we're not doing a damn thing about it. Right? We're just pussyfooting around in terms of Airbnb. Right? They sued us, and then what? We get scared. Right? We're not going to push legislation. We haven't been able to deal with the Olague. You know, the real estate lobby in Sacramento has prevented it, and we haven't used our political capital. Our public leaders at City Hall, they haven't used their political capital to change that around. Right? They could do more. Right? And the city doesn't enforce anything in terms of displacement from evictions, tenant buyouts, SRO violations. So there's so much we need to do, and I'll just end with this, that we need to focus on preservation of the existing housing stock by any means necessary. And we can talk a little later about some of the strategies that the folks have been working on.
Great. Thanks, Gordon. Estelle, what does community mean to you, and how are we losing your community, and how are we fighting back?
Thank you, everyone. So when I think about community, I like to think about it as something that is warm, interactive, connected, brings me a sense of who I am, you know, that I'm able to see around me the life of people, the everyday life of people. And in our community, and I've worked in the Mission District now 31 years, I relate very strongly to that community. I'm actually a resident of the Excelsior. But when I think about the Mission District and all the changes that have happened, I also recognize that there's something that's held me there. There's something about the people, the activism, the consciousness, you know, the ability of people to continue to resist these circumstances and these situations that really brings me a sense of personal resilience and hope. And I do think that those are very important for us to relay in our work with people. It is a battle. It is a upfront and hard battle. But I think when we act and we know that we must do this. We must resist. We must counter these situations. And there are going to be, you know, there's a lot of people here. I hope you all recognize the intelligence that's here, the experience that's here of people who have been a part of this resistance for decades. You know, my work as the executive director right now is to really try to deal with all the I was just mentioning, all the pain, you know, with the difficulty that people are facing as they deal with these issues of eviction and they deal with displacements, forced displacements. I actually don't use the word gentrification because I think that's a very mild-mannered way. It's kind of a classist concept to me. I think forced displacement is, you've got to name it. It's forced displacement, it injures people, and it has a lot of deep, re-traumatizing experiences for people, especially as we look at what's been happening in our communities of color, and particularly as I think about the Mission District and the Latino community, communities that have faced horrendous experience of immigration. You know, they don't get on a bus or a train or a flight to come to this country. They cross the desert, the water, they drown, their families drown. I mean, things happen to them that are just so deeply injurious. So the work that we do is to really, in this whole network of services, you know, that we speak of, is to be able to help hear that, right, and help people to be able to, you know, recover from those experiences and to see themselves as taking some actions. I think ultimately, you know, people are in, when they can get through this, or they can walk through this, they're oftentimes very inspired to do something about it. And that's why we have communities, particularly in the Mission, with long histories of activism. You know, think about the immigrant women that have been involved in, you know, labor organizing and dealing with evictions and, you know, fighting tooth and nail for their children and for their families. So I think, you know, we have a lot of work to do. And there are absolutely the policy issues that we need to strategize, we need to push harder, and we need to be able to preserve that which we have. But part of what I feel is the preservation is our connection to each other. You know, is our love for each other, is our ability to be angry about something and know that it's an injustice and work together to continue to fight against that, to create resistance. You know, I think that as community organizers, and there's people here that I have great respect for. One woman's right here in front of me here, Laura, you know, just an amazing woman who fights all the time and is part of speaking out against these injustices. I also, I know that, you know, our working together, our relationship, it keeps us going. It keeps us going, and that's what we have to do, because we can't stop. And all of you are here, you know, I know as students, you care and you want to be involved, and I think you need to find those ways. Everybody there's a lot of things that need to be done. May 1st is a big march. I would tell you that you can put your boots on, or your tennies, you know, don't wear high heels, if any of you do. But go out and march, and go out and be involved in raising your voice against this injustice that we're facing around immigrant rights, and be involved in things that help really, you know, voice our resistance to these, you know, these kind of tremendous barriers that we're being faced with. The stronger our community and the larger our presence, the more opportunity that we have. This is what we learn from our history, right? If you look at history of labor, if you look if you look at history in any way, when the people rise, when the number of people, you know, increase, there is change that happens. And I think we have to hold that hope and that expectation for ourselves. So I do believe that there is, you know, I believe in protracted struggle. I know it exists. I've experienced it most of my life. I always have to deal with struggle. But I also believe that we as a people and communities are you know, have exceptional capacity. And so welcome all of you to be part of that and identify with those things, you know, be a part of the solutions that we need to be. So I just want to end with that, and then thank everybody for their time.
Check. Yeah, y'all can hear me, right? Okay. So I think before I say anything, I do want to say that I am extremely humbled to be on this stage. There is a lot of experience and wisdom up here. I just want to thank y'all for having me up here, and thank y'all for coming. The question about community is interesting, because part of being the organizer is to kind of create community wherever you go. You know, it's in the title, community organizer, right? And understanding that how we build power is by building relationships between each other. And I also want to ditto a lot of what Estela had mentioned earlier. I myself, I'm born and raised kid from the Tenderloin, not too far from here. But I work in the Mission, and I currently live in the Mission right now. And I can definitely say that working in the Mission and now living there day to day, there is a sense of community just in the air. It exists in the Mission. It exists in the if you walk down 24th Street, you see it and you can feel it. If any of you ever walk down 24th Street, just pause for a second and look around, because if you compare that to any other part of San Francisco right now, it just doesn't exist anymore, right? And I think it's like the Mission is still very much rooted in a lot of the stuff that Fernando was talking about earlier, of that old history and of that idea of community, right? If you're there for the right reasons, and you are in solidarity with the struggles that are happening, you can make community out of that. Beyond that, like, part of my community is, like, as an Indian kid growing up in the Tenderloin, right? Living in a one-bedroom apartment with 6 people, and just really viewing San Francisco through that lens as we grew up here. It's different. A lot of the folks that I grew up with in the city don't live here anymore, and they don't want to live here anymore. I barely want to live here anymore. Part of my resistance is staying and being a thorn in the side of all the gentros and yuppies that are here, to be completely honest. Because I think if we can stay here and have that resistance, then we should stay here and have that resistance. Yeah, it's cheaper to live in Hayward, but I find value in being a thorn to yuppies. So it is what it is. But yeah, it's a lot of. So I don't know if people know a lot. So in the small part of the Tenderloin that we have, there was a big population of people from Gujarat, which is a state in India, that doesn't exist there anymore. There's a few people left. Some of the people who came and who had achieved economic success in the city have kind of stayed, but they kind of moved out to the outer parts. But a lot of the folks from my personal community, they're gone. They're in Southern California, they're in Texas, I have family in Arkansas and Kentucky who live like me right now, which is scary. It's very scary, actually. It's a moment of truth. But it's like, because a lot of them, there's no future here, right? A lot of the kids that I went to high school with, there's no future here, so a lot of them are gone. And I think really understanding that the people who grew up here don't recognize the city anymore is very important. And I don't think that gets talked about enough, because experiencing San Francisco is a big deal. But people's experience today is not the same of the experience that we had before. Walking down the streets fills you, well, at least myself, with both deep despair and utter frustration. Thank you. Right? It does. Because it's like, you feel, because I know who's not here anymore. I know who's been displaced. I know who's been killed by the police because of gentrification. Alex Nieto, one example out of way too many, right? And we know who, a lot of cats my age who live around the Bay, who used to grow up here, or who did grow up here, they deeply want to come back. Like, this city made us who we are, right? Like, growing up as a youth in an urban center, you are very connected to the exact streets that you live in. And then to see, through market forces, neo-colonialism, gentrification, a completely lackluster city government, to see all that being flipped and to say that your value here doesn't exist anymore because others with economic means are more important, that hurts. And that pisses you off, right? And that pisses me off, at least. And so that's how it's affected us, right? Like, there's literally been police killings because of gentrification, right? It's an actual thing. There's been increased criminalization of the streets that I grew up on, right up here, right? And I'm sure y'all see it too, going to school here. and in the mission every single day, right? They will pester people on the street more than they will pester anybody, right? Anybody. And you can have a Gentro breaking the law and no one cares, right? You have Google buses breaking the law and nobody cares. You have Airbnb breaking the law and nobody cares. You have Uber breaking the law, nobody cares, right? It'd be nice to see criminalization of the rich when they break the law in this city, right? I want to see SF parking, those little parking, I don't know, they look like little golf carts, I don't know what they're actually called. I want to see them stop a Google bus when they're blocking up when they're blocking a community stop, right? How about that? That would be something to see, right? Is it any less just? No, it's actually more just, in my opinion. And really, it's like, you know, it's like, how do we build resistance? Is, on the one hand, it's we have to call out nefarious ideas of social Darwinism in San Francisco, because that's what it is. It is the survival of the richest in this city. It is, and we have to call it out. We have to call it out for what it is, right? Gentrification, as Estela mentioned, right, is kind of losing some weight because people are tired of hearing about it, right? And then maybe we just call it for what it is. It is colonization. It is what it is. You can look at it point by point, and it is the recolonization of these cities. It is a white flight coming back to take over, right? And without sympathy for the people that are being kicked out. And we have to call it out, and we have to say, and we have to, you know, via direct action, via, you know, like kind of radicalizing the way we frame things into not something that is just on the left to be on the left, but that is through the lens of those who are oppressed in this city, right? We are in the midst of an economic boom, only for a few people. And they're the ones controlling the narrative of what San Francisco is. San Francisco is a tech center. San Francisco is innovative. San Francisco is this and that, right? Well, look at all these apps popping. Look at all these startups popping, right? No, that's not the story of San Francisco. Excuse me, that's not the story of San Francisco. The story of San Francisco is actually one of city government turning a blind eye to oppression every day. Is of people coming in and forcing others out without any remorse. It is tech companies coming in and not paying respect to not just the people, but the regulations in the city, and then getting away with it, and then just bribing the mayor and bribing people on the board of supervisors. That's the real story of San Francisco. And then the resistance that's coming from there. Whether it's Mission taking over City Hall, whether it's having an 8-hour hearing on a moratorium, or whether it's, you know, shutting down streets and blocking Google buses. And when the sheriff wants to evict somebody from our community, 50 of us show up and say, you have to arrest all of us before you can get inside this house, right? These things are happening. They're happening every day. There's not a lot of media there when eviction defenses happen, right? But we're there. You get a call at 4:30 in the morning.
Or when a 100-year-old woman is evicted from her home for 50 years. And Chirag, we probably should hand the mic off at this point because we're all going to be jumping in.
Ideally, for me, community means an environment of a cohesiveness that's binded by blood ties, languages, customs, culture, and that sort of thing. I just want to comment too, we're talking about gentrification. We fought this back in the urban renewal. They used to call it, when they were moving black people out, they had another name they called it, I would be nice, it was Negro removal. So a form of ethnic cleansing. And we see that again with gentrification here in San Francisco. It is projected by the city by the year either 2030 or 2040, San Francisco will be the whitest city in the Bay Area. So I live in San Francisco, so I don't know what that means for me. It's going to be like Star Wars. The first Star Wars, there were no black people in it. Black people in space, they were all in it. So But anyway, so I just want, but there's a little history of me. I've always had affinity with this city. I'm from Los Angeles, but I practically grew up here. I used to run away from home at 15 years old. I'm a 60s child. And I would run away from home, and I had to come to the Haight-Ashbury district. It was the summer of love and the hippies. I was a hippie. And I slept on the streets in the Haight-Ashbury district until we found housing where we found hippies who had rich parents and would leave and go to Madrid for their summer vacation or winter vacation, and we'd crash in the house. But you had to keep that down low. You couldn't let people know that those kids had rich parents. We were just like swatting. And saw Jimi Hendrix. Before he was famous, it was Jimi Hendrix and the Blue Flames. So for $1.75 in the Haiti. And later on, working with the Los Siete case. I'm a former Black Panther, and during the Los Siete case, we were sent up here to Black Panther headquarters in Fillmore, and we worked on the Los Siete case. So I was back and forth during my time as an community organizer, back and forth with the Bay Area, related around that work. But talking about gentrification, I have to talk about it and talk about the community that I'm involved with, and that is the homeless community in San Francisco. And the 70% of the homeless in this city are natives of San Francisco. Despite the myth that all of these people are coming from all over the country, the homeless people are migrating, like San Francisco is a mecca for homeless people, and that's not true at all. If you're homeless and you apply for general assistance, that's $59 a month. So living in the city like San Francisco is $59 a month, and you have to perform labor clean immunity buses. So I don't see anybody, haven't talked to anybody homeless in their right mind that came all the way from New York to San Francisco to enjoy the social benefits of San Francisco. I just want to bust that myth right now. So the community I work in is also impacted by gentrification and displacement. Gentrification in the form of more harassment by the police, more people dying, being killed, homeless people killed by the police, and not complaint driven by newly more affluent people in the community who are constantly calling the police on homeless people. As a result, San Francisco leads the state in anti-homeless laws. With 23 laws, they have 9 times more laws than any other cities in the state of California. And these laws you probably know about is lie, sit, and sleep laws, where it is illegal for a homeless person to occupy public space. You can't even stand in public space for a long time. And constantly, homeless people are being displaced through gentrification. They are told to move along. We did a study a couple of years ago, the impact of that and displacement. Homeless people camp out, and they're told to move, and they're told to move in other areas. 91% of those people actually don't leave. They just go across the street, or they go around the corner, or they might go into another neighborhood until they're told to leave out of there, and then they're shuffled back into another place. We've had cases where I've interviewed homeless women who had a safe place where they were camping out, and they were told to move, and as a result, they had to move into an unsafe place, and they were sexually harassed several times over. So that's the reality I deal with in the homeless community. I want us to understand when we talk about displacement, there's like an economic displacement, and there's also a social displacement. If I'm a third-generation resident of the Mission in San Francisco, and I've been priced out through gentrification, and I am forced to move to a place like Hayward, California, in order to afford a place to rent, I'm displaced, but I'm not homeless. So that's like an economic, and they overlap. That's an economic displacement. If I'm homeless, and I don't have the right to rest, to sit, sleep, and in many cases it's illegal to feed homeless people in public spaces, I am constantly being shuffled and moved out of one neighborhood from another, or I'm having a sweep. Right now this evening, I got reports just before I got here, there's a major sweep going on 17th Street in the Mission. I was in the Mission last week, investigating and witnessing the sweep over that was going on. We remember the Super Bowl when the mayor famously said the homeless people had to get out of town for the Super Bowl. Millions and millions and millions of dollars was spent on the Super Bowl party, and our team wasn't even in the Super Bowl, nor did they even play in San Francisco. And homeless people, the mayor went down to the embargo area and told homeless people they couldn't be there anymore, personally. And the police told homeless people in that area to go down to Division Street. And 200 people were down there. And right after the Super Bowl, this is during the El Nino season, rain, they had a sweep, and they swept the people off of Division Street. They confiscated their property and threw them in dump trucks and hoppers. We had pictures in our paper and the media show, people's walkers being thrown in in a dump truck, medicine, family memorial, and on and on and on. And this is the community I work at as a result of gentrification. Again, most of the times the police are engaging homeless people and forcing them to move is generally complaint driven. And it's either by merchants or it's by people who are living in their $4,000 a month studios and so forth. And I don't want to villainize the tech industry and workers, but a lot of that's based on what we have, the tech environment. So what we're doing, some of the strategies we're utilizing at the Coalition of Homelessness is one is a Homeless People Speakers Bureau, where we're training homeless people to speak on their behalf. Many times when the homeless people are covered in the media, they're the so-called experts speaking about homeless people. And then when homeless people are allowed to speak in the media, it's a story about drugs and the mentally ill and that sort of thing. So we want homeless people to tell their own stories, give the homeless people their own voice. March 22nd at the library, Citizen the library downtown, we will have a homeless-led workshop, totally led by homeless people. The other thing we've organized is called the Homeless People's Popular Assemblies. And this was the response of Proposition Q. And we go into the homeless camps and we hold an assembly, and what we do is we brainstorm with them and we ask them what are the solutions for the homeless crisis, because they are the experts and their solutions come out a lot better than what's coming out from downtown.
So Bilal, yeah, I think we're gonna have to move on, but thank you very much, Bilal.
Thank you.
Fernando has ceded the microphone to Christina Olague, and I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention this when running down Christina's bio. Christina has a very interesting story. Born in a farm worker community in the Central Valley, a one-time supervisor of San Francisco before she was driven out by the political machine in this city, and is a great organizer and has been working, speaking of the homeless, with the homeless group in the mission with Laura, and doing great work. And speaking of death by gentrification, Bilal, you brought that up, how dangerous it is to be on the streets in the city. Luis Gongora, you might know that case, a cook, a worker in the city, lost his home, was evicted, like so many people, ended up on the streets, and then ended up being shot and killed within 24 seconds, almost a year ago, on a street here, Shotwell was it, in the Mission. And that anniversary is coming up next month. So it's just, you know, this is a shame of San Francisco, the city that's supposed to be the city of St. Francis, where we take care of our own, that this continues to be such a scandal in our city. Christina, there's so many things you can talk about, but I'm sure that's one thing.
Yeah, I'll be brief so we can have some time open up for questions to you all. But I've been, I came here in 1982. I think maybe some of you were born then, maybe not. I came here, I was one of the weird kids. I grew up in Fresno, and in the farm labor camp, I lived there for about 15 years of my life. And so a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing now with ICE and the other immigration, I guess, is in some ways re-traumatizing, because I'm reminded of what I witnessed as a child when I saw they would call it the migra. And on payday, frequently they would be called in and they would chase people down the fields like dogs, really. And I think that right now, working in the mission and working at Mission Neighborhood Resource Center. Laura is the executive director. I wanted her to be here, but she said no. So it's just, there's a lot of people, a lot of Latinos, a lot of Chinese, Asians, a lot of immigrants of color primarily, who are living in fear right now and have a lot of anxiety because of the fear that I think this current presidential administration is imposing on so many people. And I think Estela, has worked in the field of mental health, and CIIS is, of course, a place where many of us have been educated. I am a graduate of the BAC program and also the ICP program. And Olague is here, one of the professors from ICP. And thank you for being here, And it's, I think a lot of us are called to work in the field of mental health. And right now I think our communities are really suffering because of gentrification. And I spoke earlier with Rachel Bryant, and we were talking about Oakland and how so many people of color are going to seeking help emotionally because they're struggling with the changes that they're seeing in their communities. And so I think that if any of you are interested in mental health and interested in counseling and psychology, you're probably going to find that a lot of the clients that you're going to start seeing are going to start bringing these issues of gentrification and displacement into the room. It's not something that's going to escape us. I work, again, I mentioned a Mission Neighborhood Resource Center. We work with a lot of people who are undocumented. And we also work with a lot of African American folks, a lot of white folks. And one thing that I've joked about with some of the African American clients, and it's not really funny, is there's a program in San Francisco called Homeward Bound. And in a way it's an okay program right now because a lot of people are coming in from Colorado, from New York, from other states who have this expectation of San Francisco, who have this image of San Francisco being what it used to be, a welcoming city, a city where they could come and it would be cool and you could build community. Sometimes, like in the 80s when I first got here, you could move to San Francisco, just meet people, hang out, rent a flat in the Mission for $800 on Shotwell and 24th. Now that same flat you were renting is selling for $1.2 million as a condominium, and this is no exaggeration, this is no joke. So when people come into the city, that community that they thought would embrace them, and even Latino community, like a lot of folks who come in, they think, oh, I'm going to go to the Mission, I'll meet so-and-so, I'll hook up, I'll find a place a room to stay in, and they come, and that doesn't exist anymore in the city. And so, we're facing a lot of this kind of struggle. So this Homeward Bound program, there's a lot of African American clients that I'm seeing because 40% of the population of homeless people in the city, I believe, are African Americans. 40%, and they come to me. Huh? Yeah, and the population in San Francisco of African Americans is 3.9%. So imagine that. 3.9% of the population in San Francisco are African Americans. And they come and we talk and we joke around. It's like, Homeward Bound to them is the Fillmore. Homeward Bound to them is Bayview Hunters Point. Homeward Bound for some African Americans is the Haight. So we joke around like, okay, so what good is a Homeward Bound ticket going to do me if home is San Francisco? And there are a lot of native San Franciscans that we're seeing in the center who are struggling to be here. And I'm not going to go into the minutia of the struggles in the shelters and the waiting lists and the overnight stays and all of those things. So one thing I wanted to mention briefly was when I was working as on the Planning Commission, I was 8 years, and then on the Board of Supervisors 1 year, and I'm grateful for that because I've had a lot of opportunities now to go back into the community and work in the community where really my heart and soul is. So it probably wasn't a good fit to begin with, but I learned a lot. And one of the things you learn is that things have to be mandated in this town. So I think at some point, I think we have to look for ways, maybe it'll start out as a policy statement, that housing is a human right, and that housing as a right. Last year, the focus of our talk here was housing as a public health issue. I know in Hawaii now, I think they're actually mandating it. In some instances, it's considered a health issue that you can actually, they're talking about prescribing housing for homeless people. So, I mean, you got to look for ways, because we have a lot of policies, and I think we start out as a policy, but one of the policies in San Francisco is that Department of Aging and Adult Services is aging in place. That's the policy of the city, is that people should be allowed to age in place. They've been here 40, 50 years. This is the only place they know. Like Ms. Canada, 100-year-old woman, no joke, 100-year-old woman that the sheriffs locked out of her apartment. They locked her out of her apartment, okay? So it's the level of greed and is such that we have to, I guess, speak truth to power. And so I think that's all I'm going to say for now, and then hopefully you folks will have questions for us. And I'm really proud to be here. I really, for all my struggles and bitching and moaning about CIIS, I really love the school. I guess that's part of the culture. And the culture of CIIS is something that's really beautiful. The values are really beautiful, and the East-West, the spirituality, the transpersonal, all those things. So we should take that into the streets and into our professions. And
thanks, Christina. So I guess we'll take questions now from the audience, and I'll call on people if you raise your hand, and try to make them succinct, as our speakers will, so we can have a lot of back and forth. Come on out there. You're all dying to raise some burning issue, I know. I'm going to start calling on you, even if you don't have your hand raised. Right here.
So, first of all, thank you. Thank you for saying something about Oakland. I'm born and raised there. We are hurting. I loved it when we were the ugly stepsister of San Francisco, because now I don't even recognize it. My question to you is this. I believe in the natural goodness of people, and it's easy to other tech people. And so I'm just wondering if you can tell me, has there been any outreach to that community, and it really is heartless, as I'm hearing you say, what is being done? I understand the movement around policies and government, but what has been directly done to coordinate with them?
Christina has been working on that.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I met with a young man from Zoom4, that's a tech firm in the city. It's a CEO of a startup. And he approached me and he said he wanted to be part of the solution. So we started having dinners. I don't know if any of you heard about this. Engage SF, we no longer meet, but we still kind of check in with each other. We had dinners in the Mission District, and we would invite people from the tech community and people from the Latino community to sit down and talk. So we would ask people to sit next to someone they don't know. We would have one question that we'd ask the group, like, what do you love about San Francisco? Or something personal, like, when were you a hero in your life? Something where they could find some commonality. And then we would have the person from the restaurant or whatever talk about the history of the restaurant, like how long it had been in the Mission community, how it was started. And then we might go across the street to Modern Times, and they would give us a history of the bookstore. And so we tried to engage with the tech community in that way. And now with San Francisco Vision, what we're trying to do is engage people from the tech community who share our values. So we're saying, if you share our values, then you're welcome here. And I think that many do, and they're not sure where to go and what to do with it. So we're trying to engage more with people from the tech community, because I'm not convinced that it's this monolith. And And so I think
Well, and it's about class and power, don't you think, Christina, and everyone? I mean, there's Ron Conway, obviously, the Airbnb investor behind the power, the power behind the throne at City Hall. And then there's, you know, people we all see, friends of ours, people who I used to work with when I ran Salon, young engineers, people working for these tech companies, who get up at 6 in the morning, pile on these buses, you know, work their asses off all day long, working on their computers on the way home. Then they're dumped into their cubicles here, which are what these overpriced boxes are that they're renting. And they have these really, I think, banal, kind of sterile lives. And they're not, many of them are not happy with that way of life. And so when I talk to a lot of these young people, they totally relate to wanting to feel part of the city in a way that they're not. They feel, you know, like they're being turned into robots. And they are. And so I think we have a real opportunity to, not all of them, but to really reach out to some of them. They're not yet coalesced into a political force. We see that from the voting statistics. And they're up for play. And so I think it's progressives' jobs not just to demonize them, but to really enter into a dialogue with them.
Yeah, last week I had the opportunity, myself and a couple of my comrades from the coalition, last month we were invited by a tech person. She invited us to come to The Hague and give a presentation on homelessness and the conditions and so forth. And we respectfully went there. Always invited like that, but that's interesting. So we didn't expect maybe 3 or 4 people there. There were a dozen people there. And we had a conversation with them. They were very sincere about what they could do, you know, to help alleviate this crisis. And so it was a very fruitful conversation. It was 2 hours. Laura was also with us. And so there was an interest. And they are going to talk to other folks, and hopefully we set up house meetings with other friends that can set up house meetings with that. So we were very, very encouraged by that. Also, I've had the opportunity to have to respond where there's the neighbors, and a lot of them are tech people, are up in arms about homeless encampments near their residence. Especially, one was on 15th off of Mission. And we went to this meeting, and generally when you go to these meetings, this crowd is the torch and pitchfork crowd. You know, it's just like those Frankenstein movies when they're headed to the take out, yeah. So, so anyway, so the discussion was going. They were blaming the captain, the mission, the police there, and they were blaming him of allowing homeless people in encampments and on and on. One lady says, I can't walk down the street and feel safe because I'm a white woman with an expensive purse. I don't know what it meant, but that's what she said. And on and on and on. So I just laid the gauntlet down and challenged them because their concerns, and it is a valid concern, so don't get me wrong, their concerns around sanitation and safety and that sort of thing. And I had to explain to them that homeless people, they share those same concerns about sanitation and about safety and those conditions also. So it made sense, I told them, to form a collaborative with their neighbors, because the homeless people are residents too, and a lot of them have been there in those communities a lot longer than these folks have. So I laid a challenge down to them that form a collaborative with houseless people, come up with solutions, because they have ideas, and use your power, because they do have some influence with the city, and join in with houseless people and demanding that the city provide more affordable housing. So we continue to put that challenge out. But again, I was very, very encouraged by these tech folks that invited us to speak last week.
Can I jump in, since we don't have a sea of hands, and ask the panel a question, which I've been sort of percolating for a while. So it seems like we're really stuck politically in the city right now in terms of the makeup of the Board of Supervisors. We lost the progressive majority, unfortunately, in the last election. The mayor, as we've been hearing, is not really a visionary or activist leader by any measure. So I've been sort of talking to some activists on the housing issue about doing something kind of dramatic at this point. There is unused city property sitting vacant. There's a number of people with construction skills in this city who I think could be called upon to help us take that property that is ours as citizens of San Francisco and to begin to build our own nonprofit housing on that city property. We've seen these dramatic actions really catalyze people in the past, whether it was Occupy at Zuccotti Park, where I was the first weekend in New York, or Standing Rock, where I also had a very inspiring time with my son, in the fall. We see how these forums can really electrify people. And this city, that is such a, I think, burning issue, housing, that if people were to take the initiative and start doing something positive like that, taking it into our own hands, of course there would be pushback, there might be police action, but it would be a very, I think, educational moment, don't you think, for the city?
Definitely.
Any responses to that?
Yeah. How about out there? Oh, I see someone with their hand up. Yay. Come on. Come on, you want to come up? Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. I don't remember your name, ma'am, but you mentioned something about making
Estela.
I'm sorry?
Estela.
Estela, hey. Hi, I'm Garcia. Thank you. So, we're really breaking down community right now in our cohort, and it's challenging. And so my question for you, and for all of you or anyone, is how do we build this strong community? Because I hear all of you talking about, I think, things that we're already all thinking about, but I really personally don't know where to go. Like, I'm always on the streets if I can find places to go. Like, if there are demonstrations that I hear about, I'm there. But, like, I would like to know where each of you work, and know what each of you are doing so I can show up, And I want to know, basically, like, how are we all going to show up like you're talking about? I don't feel like we're going to leave this talk, unless I ask that question, feeling like I know what to do. So if you don't mind, tell me what to do.
I don't mind. I think
and also, one more question for you, sir. When are the people who are homeless speaking? You said it was at the 22nd of what month?
Yeah, there's some flyers on the table. It's March 20. There's some flyers on the table. It's March 22nd. It's a homeless workshop led by homeless people.
Yes, thank you.
So,
Fernando? Oh, I'm sorry.
Just go ahead. Just really, like, if you think about one place, or the Coalition on Homelessness it's a long-standing coalition that really activates volunteers in the homeless community, and as you were pointing out, the homeless community are leading. It's a community-led process, and so though there are coalitions all over the city that you can participate in, and there are ways, that being one of them, right? There's also anti-gentrification efforts or displacement coalitions that you can hook into. And I think, here even maybe perhaps one of the things that we should suggest is that this place, CIIS, develop some opportunities for people to be able to provide information so that all of you could actually become volunteers.
Clinical support.
Pardon?
Clinical support.
And clinical support. And we were talking about the Positive Resource Center.
We need interns. We need students.
Yeah.
There's also San Francisco Vision, right, Christina? We have a Facebook.
So we have San Francisco Vision, and we meet, and we have a Facebook page. So I don't know if there's a sign-in sheet or not tonight, but maybe I can borrow it, and then I can inform you when we have things going on. One thing we want to start doing more of this year are trainings for people, like 101s, and then also, like you saw the slideshow earlier, to do more history, to have people like Gordon come out and talk about the history of his work in Chinatown, because a lot of people don't know the history. The queer community, right now there's When We Rise Again, or When We Rise Up, or whatever it is on television. So that gives the history of the queer community here. And a lot of us, I'm queer, came here because we didn't feel comfortable where we lived, and a lot of queer people are saying, where do we go? Now, we're priced out of San Francisco, so if we're in Missouri and we're being harassed, we're screwed. And stoned and killed, what do we do? So, San Francisco Vision's one thing. I think also, like Laura said, we could use, we have a little art workshop. And, if you have certain types of skills that you could share, you know, our workshop meditation, we could do a little meditation, then do some art.
You mean the Mission Neighborhood Center?
Mission Neighborhood Center, yeah. And there's people that are out there doing what is sidewalk therapy.
But also in the movement, Plaza 16 Coalition, I'm
Yeah.
going to mention, we're about to try to stop the biggest tower. You guys may have heard about the monster in the Mission.
Yeah.
It's reviving, so we're fighting back. And at Plaza 16 last year, one thing we needed was really clinical support and trauma support, because a lot of our communities are really under siege. So I just want to say Plaza 16 Coalition, you can also go on Facebook, and we're about to have the biggest battle on 16th and Mission.
Yeah.
So we will need a lot of folks out.
You say the name again, Mom?
Plaza 16 Coalition, Coalición Plaza 16.
Yeah, let's start infusing the spiritual. I mean, CIIS is very much about transpersonal spiritual values, east-west. Let's start infusing the movement with that again.
Yeah.
Because it's lacking. Yeah, you in the back.
Yeah, can I just ask a question where that some of the space is that you were saying that is ours? Because I feel like that's not information that people know. And I know a lot of young men who are unemployed, qualified construction workers. So to hear that there's even space that is ours is you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, David's,
If we're even allowed to know.
well, I mean, the city has a surplus property ordinance, but it really isn't a surplus property ordinance. It's only surplus if that department, you know, says they don't need it. So all these departments own property, they're not using it, but they're not giving it up either, right? So David's absolutely right. Public land should go to public purpose, right? And not be sold off to developers or to cut deals. Right, so if there are opportunities to take over a piece of property, right, and sort of embrace the idea, you know, Habitat for Humanity, right, everyone loves them because it's not the government, because it's people raising up and their bootstraps and barn raising kind of thing, right, so, yeah, but we need to embrace that kind of a philosophy in a progressive vein, you know what I mean? Taking over land that should be people's land, doing it ourselves, and making a statement of what that means. Right? We're not going to do it all, but we need to make those statements, and those symbols are very important.
So, I shouldn't have probably raised the issue as a Chronicle columnist, but what the hell? Let's start talking about it. So if you're interested, you know, you can email me at dtalbot@sfchronicle.com, and we'll start talking about this as a possible, at least symbolic action. You know, we only have 5 more minutes, so I'm going to throw this back to the panel, and I'm going to throw in my own question here that I think we can end on a high note with. I'd like to ask each one of you in 1 minute or less to talk about the one thing that gives you hope as you look forward into these dark Trump days. What one thing locally gives you hope that you're working on and you find very exciting? Gordon?
Can I have 2? Well, the first is the idea of sanctuary, right? Needs to be permeate everything we do, right? Sanctuary cities, sanctuary churches, sanctuary schools, sanctuary restaurants, right? And that means a lot. We need to talk about what that means. Secondly, what gives me hope is people are starting to understand the connections between displacement in a neighborhood, you know, criminal justice and police brutality, and immigration. Because they all relate to not only a person's self-worth or a family's self-worth, but our sense of place in this neighborhood, in this city, in this country. So there are connections happening that we all sort of feel, right? And that's why the Trump stuff and the displacement stuff here is all connected, right? And we need to not just connect the dots, but sort of integrate our strategies so that we understand the full dimensions of what we're doing.
What gives me hope is that I see a rise, I see people standing up, I see people speaking around about the issues, and I see people organizing. And we are really fortunate in this city to have such an incredible history of organizing. And I think what we're doing now is that we're coming more and more to understand our mutual struggles. And I hope that we will all see that. These are class wars, And these are wars which will affect our very sense of who we are and you know, living in the city. And so I think that these are things that we need to continue to do. I just want to also say that I think what gives me hope is celebration. I see it in many forms. I participated in, and I'm inspired by people that can still dance in the street, that can still say what love is really about, right? And that can celebrate the resiliency of people.
Okay, perfect. First thing, just kind of answering the question from the crowd too, was, so Bay Resistance is a group that has formed to have actions against anything Trump, basically. Anything nefarious going on. So you can, it has a website, you can put your phone number in and they'll send you text alerts when actions are going to happen. Bay Resistance. Write it down.
Tomorrow, Mission High School, 1 o'clock.
Yes, there is an organizing training that's being put on by Bay Resistance tomorrow, Mission High School, 1 o'clock. Be there. Perfect. Another thing that gives me hope is, so one thing that's kind of lacking right now in the city that we're starting to work on is kind of like a bench of local, born and raised, locally raised people of color to take over positions of power in this city. Not just to like up our organizing game, but to kind of replace the electeds who use San Francisco as a place to move up politically, to take them out and to put folks who actually grew up on these streets into elected office. And to say that folks who went to SFUSD, schools, public schools in the city, should be on the school board. I don't know a lot of folks who are still on the school board today, even if they're great and on our side, who actually went to these schools. I went to Bessie Carmichael right down the street, right? And all these public schools, right? That's the experience that's needed. And then last thing that gives me hope.
Chirag, so how's that working? How's that program coming together to develop that talent?
So there's a group called SF Rising, which is helping to do that. But there's also, for Fernando and I were just talking about it earlier, I was basically just telling him, can you please tell me everything you know, somehow, some way, is that we're still trying to figure that out. But I think it's going to be part of me organizing my age folks, and then other folks being like, yo, this is the information we need from y'all, because in 10, 15 years, we're going to be here. And we need to catch up real quick. And the last thing is, it's going to sound a little weird, but I think Trump is galvanizing a lot of people in this city to kind of finally put where their rhetoric into actual policy, and then actually turning moral imperatives into civic duties, and then holding them accountable to that. And I think really saying that if you're not here for our people, if you ain't here for our communities in actual policy, then you're on the other side. Right? And really drawing that line in the sand and saying, look, this is a time where we need to fight back against fascism in the most extreme way. And finding ways that, look, if you want to, if Mayor Lee wants to call this a sanctuary city, actually call it a sanctuary city and actually put forth policies that protect people, right? ICE was in the sunset yesterday. That should not be happening here. We should having a public declaration saying we do not want any federal police in our city.
And fully fund Jeff Adachi's public defender's office to defend people who are at risk.
Yes, and also to answer your inquiry, the Coalition on Homelessness has two working groups. One is the Housing Justice Working Group, and the other one is the Human Rights Working Group. And the Human Rights Working Group meets every Wednesday at 12:30 to 2:30. You're quite welcome to come sit in. We say you get in where you fit in. What gives me hope every day is my age, just waking up in the morning and seeing my partner's smiling face. That's a person. What gives me hope is really his saying Donald Trump is giving a lot of people a wake-up call. And I've always, during my organizing experience, always noticed there's 3 positions people take, or 3 positions people find themselves in. And one is there's those people who are in a position that make things happen. And there's those people who take that position of watching things happen. And then there's those people that take that position and wonder what the fuck happened. So I'm seeing now more people because of Donald Trump, and a lot of this thing about Donald Trump was going on before him. People, fascism, Donald Trump did not create fascism. It's been here, as George Jackson said. But I'm seeing people now waking up and moving from that third position, wondering what the fuck happened, and moving from that second position, just watching things happen, and moving, especially our young people, and moving in that position who wants to make things happen. So that gives me a lot of hope.
So I'm going to riff on Gordon's sanctuary city, because I think that one of the things that gives me hope is that I think around the country people are rallying to the idea of sanctuary cities, to the idea that we have something to defend. We have built something here, despite all of what we talked about, the things that we don't like that have been happening in San Francisco. We have built some powerful organizations. We come from some deep communities that are rooted here, and that is what we are defending. And I think part of sanctuary cities is it comes from governments, local communities taking a stand, but it came from something deeper than that before. It was church people coming together to say, our churches are places where refugees from these places can come and be safe, and no one can take them out. And so I think back to your question about what we can do as a broad community is to enact that idea of sanctuary as allies, whether it is with the Coalition on Homelessness, with the Mission Neighborhood Resource Center, with other organizations like the Tenants Union or Housing Rights Committee or Plaza 16, any of these organizations where you find your community to be enacting what we are defending here in San Francisco.
In closing, I think the resilience of everyone I'm sitting on the panel with, of Laura, who's worked in the community forever, and having all of you hear someone asking, like, what do I do now? You know, that gives us hope. You know, walking down, I went to the Women's March, it was pouring rain, and there was like no end to the march. And there were people there who had never marched ever in their whole life. And people were out there. And what was different about this march was everyone was smiling, everyone was greeting each other. It wasn't like angry march. There wasn't anger, there was joy, despite what we're having to deal with the Trump administration. And all that's gonna come down. We're ready for it, man. We'll just fight, you know? And the people I work with, and seeing all the resilience of the people the community members that we see every day. And finally, I think I have this picture of John Coltrane on my, taped in front of my desk. And I do that because here was a man, he died when he was 40, but he lived in Jim Crow. He grew up in the South in North Carolina. He was in the Navy. He grew up like poor. And nothing, despite all of those challenges, nothing diminished his genius. So it's like, if he could survive all that, then, you know.
Bring it on.
Bring it on.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Sarah Talbot for helping pull us together. There you are, Sarah. Thank you.